Let's kick things off by setting the scene. Imagine the Punjab of the late 1800s, known as India's Golden Bird. Out of this vibrant land came Sundar Singh, born in the little town of Rampur in 1889. He wasn't just anyone. His family had deep Sikh roots, and his mother, especially, was a huge influence.
The way his mother shaped his early spiritual life really stands out to me. She'd take him to meet sadhus, these revered holy people. And she'd often say she hoped he'd become a sadhu himself someday. That's not exactly the dream most parents have, right? By the time he was 7, he already knew the entire Bhagavad Gita by heart.
That's kind of mind-blowing. 7 years old and reciting a sacred text cover to cover. It really shows how deeply faith and learning were woven into his childhood. And he was incredibly close to his mother later. He even said, "If I do not see my mother in heaven, I shall ask God to send me to hell so that I may be with her."
That bond really ran deep. But something I always find interesting is how, even surrounded by all that faith at home, he found himself in a totally different spiritual environment at school. He attended a Presbyterian mission school where, suddenly, the Bible became part of his daily lessons. That must have been confusing, or even jarring, for him as a kid.
Yeah, and Sundar didn't just quietly go along with it either. He really resisted everything those Bible lessons stood for. He actually became hostile toward them, even tearing up and burning Christian texts. It wasn't just disagreement, it was almost a rebellion.
For him, it went even deeper after his mother died. He was only 14, and losing her just devastated him. That grief really seemed to harden his rejection of Christianity. He even led a group that called themselves Enemies of the Faith. But what's fascinating is that even then, the words from the Bible he'd heard somehow kept echoing in his mind.
That tension between rejecting something and constantly thinking about it must have been exhausting. Sundar would stay up late at night, reading and questioning, while his father worried about him ruining his eyesight from all the stress.
His father's concern feels so relatable. Why torment yourself so much? But Sundar was completely consumed by his search for peace. He kept saying, "I must have peace at all costs." That kind of hunger for answers can push a person to some pretty desperate places.
That brings us to one of the most intense moments in his story. Heartbroken and restless, Sundar was so desperate that one night he decided if God didn't reveal himself, he'd end his life. That's just such a raw, vulnerable place to be.
It's hard to even imagine what that night must have felt like. He sat praying through the darkness, and then, just before dawn, his room filled with this radiant light. He thought there was a fire. When he saw there wasn't, he kept praying, and suddenly he had this vision. A man surrounded by light, with a voice saying, "Why do you persecute me? Remember that I gave my life for you upon the cross."
And in that moment, Sundar realized he was seeing Jesus, the very figure he'd rejected so fiercely. The vision was so powerful that he said he felt an overwhelming peace like he'd never known. He ran to his father shouting, "I am a Christian," but his father just thought he'd gone mad.
His dad's reaction is kind of heartbreaking, isn't it? He was scared for his son and worried about what the community would think. But Sundar was so certain, telling him, "He has given me the peace which no one else could give." That's where his life really turned a corner.
It's hard to imagine the courage it took for Sundar to stand by that experience. His father, feeling deeply betrayed, eventually expelled him. And it's chilling to learn that Sundar's last meal at home was laced with poison. The fallout was immediate and brutal.
That story always hits me. He spent his first night after being driven out shivering under a tree, remembering how only yesterday he'd been surrounded by comfort. Yet, he described feeling a kind of joy and peace he'd never known before. He even called that freezing night his first night in heaven.
It makes you think about what real conviction costs. Even with all that suffering, no food, no shelter, he felt a strength from his new faith that he'd never felt in the warmth of his own home. The next day, he collapsed from the poison, but somehow recovered against all odds.
What's wild is how the community rallied around him after that. Local Christians took him in, and a doctor nursed him back to health. It's almost as if every setback just solidified his path even more. The tension, though, didn't end there. Getting baptized would prove just as tricky.
That actually reminds me, because of strict laws, Sundar had to wait until he turned 16 to be baptized. And even then, the missionaries worried that doing it publicly might cause a riot. So he was sent to Simla, where he was finally baptized on his birthday.
Just imagine the symbolism. On his 16th birthday, he's baptized, and just 33 days later, he puts on the saffron robe of a sadhu. He set out barefoot, carrying nothing but his robe, turban, and a New Testament. His approach was so radical that even some Christian missionaries weren't sure what to make of him.
And he truly lived like a wandering holy man. Sometimes villages welcomed him, sometimes he was driven away, and often he slept in the open or in caves. He never begged. He trusted that if he was meant to have food or shelter, it would come after he preached.
There's something incredibly compelling about that kind of faith, never knowing where your next meal will come from, but going anyway. His journey took him all over India and eventually into the Himalayas, where he would disappear, leaving behind stories that still inspire people today.
So here's this man, born out of deep tradition, transformed by a vision, and then choosing a path that baffled and inspired everyone around him. Even today, his disappearance in the Himalayas is shrouded in legend. No one knows exactly what happened.
That's the piece that always sticks with me, the sense of unfinished story. His life is still studied because it raises so many questions about faith, sacrifice, and what it means to really follow your convictions, even when it costs you everything.
And maybe that's why people find his story so powerful. It's a reminder that spiritual journeys aren't always neat or easy, but sometimes they light a path for others long after the traveler is gone.
Absolutely. Sundar Singh's legacy isn't just about what he did, it's about the hope he offered and the questions he forced people to ask about their own lives. That blend of mystery and inspiration is why his story keeps getting retold, generation after generation.